marriage, go together like a horse and
Hi, how are you? This is Mike Haber, and I'm happy to have you all here with us again on episode number 5 of At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. Today we have a special guest joining us, David Bonham. David is a family law litigator. He specializes in all sorts of matrimonial related work, both pre and post and during. And Dave is going to help us to be at your service with regards to discussions about the intersection of criminal law and family law. There's an awful lot to talk about here. And Dave is in a real interesting position because some might think that criminal defense is actually the most dangerous of all of the legal professions, all of the legal niches. But the truth is that family law is the most dangerous, hands down. More family lawyers get shot and victimized by people than any other type of lawyer. And more family lawyers have suicides than any other type of lawyer. So Dave, fortunately, is of sound mind, and he's also very pro Second Amendment. He's strapped all the time. So I think he's probably safe from both of those angles. And I'm glad to have him here with us. I know Ed, my co-host, Mr. Martinez.
What? I heard strapped. Not me. I don't know. She's lying. What? What did we say?
We're all happy to be here today.
I wasn't paying attention.
And we're happy to have you guys here with us. So we're going to talk a little bit about where criminal law and family law meet. And there's a lot of intersections.
Actually, this is great because you do criminal mainly. I don't think you've ever done any family, really.
No, I did.
And David does family, and I've done a little bit. I do more criminal, but
both.
I've done a little bit of family.
So interestingly enough, since you brought that up, I will share a little personal experience with the folks. When I graduated law school, and you mentioned this on one of our previous shows, I never went to work.
Nobody liked you.
I never went to work for the state or for the PD. I went and hung my own shingle and started my own practice from day one.
Which is ballsy.
So I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer, but the problem is it's very difficult to get people to entrust you with their liberty when you're as green as a Granny Smith apple and you've never tried a case in your life. So I hung around the criminal courthouse, and because I couldn't get criminal cases, I sucked up as much knowledge as I could by hanging out and learning from some really talented attorneys. I mean, going back to 91, you remember some of the guys that were practicing then.
Actually, you worked with one that was a pretty good lawyer.
So that being the case, I wound up doing family law work for cops and corrections officers. I hung out in the pickle barrel. That's what it was called at the time.
And that's tough work in family law, man.
Well, let me tell you, they always
cops and corrections officers.
Nobody had more problems, and they don't have money, you know.
Correct.
And it's not like they're rolling in dough. So for $25 an hour, I cut my teeth in family court. And over 3 or 4 years, I developed my criminal practice, and I was able to get out of the family business. The reason I bring that up is just to say this. I always thought that the slimiest, lowest, most disgusting, despicable thing you could do as an attorney was criminal defense.
No.
And then I discovered family law.
But wait, are you talking about the family lawyers or are we talking about the clients?
I think it's the conglomeration of both. But actually, that reminds me of a joke. Do you know what the difference is between a family law client and a criminal law client?
Many, but I'm sure you have a funny one.
Do you know?
No,
either of you know?
Do not know.
The family law client doesn't have on the handcuffs yet.
Exactly.
Yet.
That is true.
So
very true.
So the most natural starting point, I think, for these types of this intersection is domestic violence, because in every single criminal domestic violence case, there's a mandatory stay away order. We call it a no contact order that the judge is required to give to the defendant. And if it's a family situation, somebody's now out of their house.
Right.
They're not able to see their kids, maybe. They're not able to exercise visitation. They may not be able to get to their computer or to their personal belongings.
And since you're on the subject, if I may, there's still an area of this world where sexism is acceptable. Because if there's a domestic violence call and the husband and wife got into it and she hit him with a pot and he slapped her, who's going to get arrested?
I guess it depends on who's bruised and beaten most.
He's getting arrested. You and I both know the majority of the time they arrest the male.
I'll tell you what I've seen a lot. I've seen them both get arrested.
I haven't seen that. That's happening lately more.
It's more frequent.
Lately, it's happening more because people are complaining, I think, because a lot of people have complained over the years. The cops have always arrested the man. Then you find out that it was actually the wife who did something. She either instigated or came at him with a weapon, and then everybody starts looking bad. And I think now they're doing it either both or just a man. And the reason they do that, Michael, and I can tell you this from having a lot of cop friends, it's a liability issue. And I have to tell this to my clients all the time. Do not call the cops on a domestic violence case unless you are 100% sure you're ready to have somebody arrested, because they're going to arrest somebody. Because if they don't arrest, so let's say Michael and I are lovers. Okay,
that's not it. How about we find another example?
No, but seriously,
Anything other than that.
Let's say that I'm the husband and I'm with my wife, right?
That works.
And the cops come and whatever. They're not even sure if anybody hands were laid on, but she said, yes, I'm terrified of him. He hit me. And I can say I didn't hit her. If anything, I'm terrified of her. They're going to arrest me. Why? Or her. Because they could leave and then I kill her or she kills me. And you know what the cop who's representing the estate or the family of the dead person says? Let's sue the government. Let's sue the cops. They were there and they let him stay. And then because they let Martinez stay, he killed his wife. And so they arrest you.
Yeah, the trend is 25 years ago when I started practicing, they would not always take someone in. But if there's a domestic call now, somebody is going downtown. Somebody is going downtown. So they're getting very serious.
Right.
And a lot of times, to bounce off what you said, a lot of times it's not even so much you telling your client, don't make the call, because a lot of times it's some third party that makes the call. If you live in a condo, it's your neighbor, it's the concierge.
And I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying don't make the call. Notice what I said. I said make damn sure that you're ready to have your significant other be arrested.
Or yourself.
Or yourself. Just make sure, because I know a lot of times it gets heated. This happens a lot, right? How many times has this happened, Michael? We get a call from a client who says, I got arrested for domestic violence. Well, what do you think? Oh, no, it's going to be okay. My wife was just pissed, and she's going to tell the state she wants to drop it.
And I've got a case right now where it's a paternity matter. The parties aren't married, but he allegedly beat the living snot out of her. She called the police. He called the police. And then when the police show up, she says, no. Don't take him in. We're okay. Nothing happened. Okay. Well, they took him in anyway.
Too late.
Yeah. They took him in anyway, because like you said, they're not going to chance it. And their orders are take somebody in. If they show up, they're taking you in.
And here's what I give those things sometimes, actually, I mean, it's kind of, we'll jump to this later, but just bringing it up because it's now hitting on my head, is the corollary to these criminal cases are the domestic injunctions, right?
Correct.
It's a civil restraining order that kind of serves, it's not an arrest, but it's basically similar.
Right.
If violation of that injunction
is criminal. Yep. And so there's a concept, which I'm sure you are much more well aware of, Dave, than I am, called strategic weaponization of domestic violence restraining orders. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little about that?
Do family lawyers openly speak about this?
Well,
I'm not welcome at a lot of these family lawyer functions. So
unfortunately,
it's not limited to family lawyer functions, bro.
There's other reasons. Unfortunately, it's been my experience that there are lawyers that will specifically advise, usually their female client, make him swing at you. Get him upset and make him take a swing. Then call 911, have him arrested. He'll be thrown out of the house. You'll have exclusive use and possession of the house for some period of time at least, and usually for the balance of the case. And he will have very limited, if any, time sharing with the children.
And at the same time, they double down on that and have him take out a restraining order too.
Absolutely.
That's why people, not just men, but are you guys listening? Men and women, are you listening? When you're pissed, when your significant other's pushing your buttons, walk away. Get in your car and drive off.
That's exactly, you are, Ed, one of the things I love about you is
be careful. One
of the things I love about you, very much like me, is you are not a do as I say kind of guy. You're a do as I do kind of guy, because that's exactly what you do.
Absolutely.
Every time you and your significant other go at it, you call me from the car and you're like, dude, but what are you doing? Oh, I'm in my car.
I'm driving.
You had another argument? Yep. But that's what you do. You leave every single time.
Correct. And it's important. That's what I tell my male clients, because oftentimes, like you said, Michael, you alluded to the fact that it's often the neighbor, especially in condos. We're very condo rich down here in South Florida. Oftentimes it's the neighbor that's going to call 911. And if the testimony on the stand, I tell my male clients, if the testimony from the neighbor on the stand is, I heard her screaming at him and then I saw him leave. Did you hear him screaming? No. What did you hear him do? Nothing. What happened? I saw him leave. That's where you want to be if you're going to represent him.
Correct.
You don't want him.
And then what happens? Let's be honest. Let's be most of the times it's a situation where people are pissed at each other, right? Everybody's pissed. So she's yelling and screaming at you. And if she's going to, let's say she's going to do something nefarious, she's not going to admit what she actually told you. But when you're driving off, brother, let me tell you, some of the text messages I get when I'm in my car, oh man.
There's another little
if she was trying to do something to me, she's going to look bad.
There's another little pro tip for you folks. Hold off on the text messaging, because unless you send it, which I now know because I have a client who actually showed me this the other day. If you do it through WhatsApp, you can delete the message that you send, and you can delete the message that you sent from being received. So in other words, the recipient's phone actually deletes the message. Now you can't stop them from screenshotting it, but that doesn't work on Messenger. It only works on an encrypted
but don't even do it.
like WhatsApp.
Really, the best advice is don't engage.
Right, exactly.
Don't engage.
But that was the point. So the pro tip here is, look, you may leave, and good if they're sending you nasty texts.
Don't respond.
Screw you. Don't come back. Next time I'm gonna get you. Blah, blah. Fine, collect them, save them. Just keep your cool and don't reply.
And you don't have to do anything with them. I mean, listen, we're all human, right? And I'm Cuban, so I can say this. Cubans here, do mine, give him mine. Do mine, please. I think I can say this, but Cubans have a temper, right? That's just the way we are. We don't hit each other. We don't hit our spouses or anything, but we have a temper. For what a lot of other cultures consider fighting, we just consider talking. Okay? So I know that. And my fiance is very similar. She's Persian. So if you've known any Persians, it's the same thing. What other people consider arguing and fighting is just them talking. So I recognize that I'm not always going to, we're not always going to be, what may appear to somebody else wasn't really a fight. So all these text messages that, let's say your spouse sends you, you don't have to do anything with them, but just in case that she's trying to set you up, you now have the proof. If she's not, and you guys are madly in love, and I hope you are, and you're going to spend the rest of your lives together until you die in each other's arms in a convalescent home like The Notebook, you always have the ammunition in case, just in case. Kind of like Batman keeps the kryptonite just in case Superman goes crazy. Just keep those ads. That's your kryptonite.
And I always tell my clients, if it's on, preferably send an email, because emails get stored and backed up on a third-party server. Text messages, you lose your phone. The only copy of those text messages are going to be on her phone.
Yeah, or so you can forward those text messages to your email.
Forward them to your email. You got to download them. You got to find an app so you can save those text messages, because if you don't save the text messages, they didn't happen. 2 magic words: electronic evidence. Electronic evidence.
And we had a case, actually. Did we already talk about the case that we did together?
No, but we can go into that. We did a show last week with Carlos Fuentes, our investigator, where we were talking about the necessity for teamwork and how important it is in many cases for lawyers to figure out not only what's going on with the case, but how to best accomplish the client's objective. Because there usually is more than just one goal. There's usually a secondary, maybe even a tertiary objective. And I had a case that I got about a little over a year ago, where my client was arrested for aggravated assault with a firearm, domestic. And he was also charged with child endangerment because there was an 8-month-old baby present during the scene of this incident. His wife called the police, and a report was made. The call went about an hour and a half after the incident had occurred, and the incident occurred in Coral Gables. The call went out from North Miami. So plenty of time had elapsed between the incident itself and the 911 call. Meantime, 15 police officers from 3 different agencies show up at the house, and they of course arrest my client. Firearms are involved. He's got a trophy room where he displays about 30 firearms. They're on wall mounts.
Good for him.
and they take all of his guns, and they take him into custody.
And I'm not blaming the cops. Let's be clear. And the cops had to do this.
Listen, they're doing their job. So, and by the way, the client did his job, kept his mouth shut. He made absolutely no statements, refused to talk, said, "I want my lawyer." So ultimately, we bonded him out. He had a stay away order. He wasn't allowed to go home. His wife was pissed as could possibly be, very still hot from this incident. Apparently, it was not the first time that they had words or arguments, but maybe it was the first time that a firearm was involved.
They have been.
Either way, whatever the case, the client and I met, and the first thing that he told me is, I love my wife and I want to make this work. So I now have my antennas up to two things. First is I've got to defend this guy from the knucklehead allegations. But secondly, I have to figure out a way to help him in regards to family. So the first call I make is to Dave Bonham. And I explain the situation to him. And I say, Dave, I expect that the wife is going to go consult with a divorce lawyer at some point. I want to bring you on board from the get-go.
Especially if he pointed a gun in her face. I don't know what he did, but if he did.
That was the allegation. But not that he pointed it at her, but that he was recklessly waving it in the vehicle because he was intoxicated. So that was one component. The second component was I brought Carlos, my investigator, on board. And I said, we need Carlos in here.
Which, by the way, so the audience knows, intoxication is not a defense.
Right. And then the third component to it was that because I know this client and I know his history, I insisted as a condition of representation. I told him I will not represent you if you do not engage in a meaningful therapeutic relationship with a licensed psychologist, not a social worker, not your friend, not your priest, not your buddy, not your bartender.
Wait. So, I was a former bartender.
That's
buddy.
okay. And that's
how many people I helped?
I'm sure plenty.
Well, Michael's point was it wasn't that he had to exclusively go to the therapist,
but he had to go to the therapist. So I coordinated. The point is, I coordinated this group effort. So Dave and I met with the family, and we met with the client, and we mapped out a strategy. Sure enough, the wife not only went to a divorce lawyer, but took out a domestic restraining order against him. So now he had the criminal case with the no contact order. He had the civil case with the restraining order. And Dave and myself had to choreograph working through it. Ultimately, as this case progressed, things went very well. This kid really dedicated himself to bettering himself. And after a period of about 9 months of therapy, and he took anger management classes, and the two of them started communicating first with his therapist and then with their third-party pastor, and they decided they wanted to reconcile. And so at that point, she discharged her family lawyer, and we brought in Ed Martinez, and Ed became her attorney. Now, just so that the folks understand, because you and I are sitting here, we're buddies.
Right.
So how is it that I'm representing the defendant and you're representing the victim and there's no conflict of interest here?
Because I do what my job is, which is to represent her. And you understand that. And I understand that Michael's job is to represent his client. Look, I always give this analogy in this situation. I played a lot of baseball. My brother was 4 years older than me. And did you play any baseball, David?
Barely.
Okay. So
poorly, I guess I should say poorly.
there's a situation in baseball. I won't bore you with I'll make it quick. If you know, you know. If you don't, that's not important. The issue is with 2 outs in the 9th inning with a man on second base and first base open, the strategy in that situation is to walk this batter, right? Because if this guy gets even a single, they're going to win. But if I get him on first base, he might, there's now a force play. So the guy can't score. Things are different. You always want to walk the guy.
We're going to make this easy.
You want to walk the guy. So I was playing baseball now in a men's league. I was in my 30s, right? I was in my 30s, and my brother was in it was 40. I was 36. And the young kids we were playing with, it was a really competitive men's league. One day we're warming up, and one of the kids says, man, Ed, you throw really hard, and you used to pitch, and your brother's a really good hitter. What would you do in that situation? Now, I know what he's thinking. In his mind, he's thinking, would I throw at my brother and compete, right? Or would I walk him? And I looked at him, and I said, why don't you ask my brother what I would do? And he says to my brother, I was warming up way down there. He goes, same thing. And my brother didn't hesitate. He said, my brother, he'd throw at my head. He'd hit me in the ear. And the kid's like, but he's your brother. I said, no, when we cross those lines, if he's on the other team, he's on the other team. And he knows that. So my point is, Michael knows that I'm representing her and that's my job, and I'm going to do it the best I can. And so he's going to do what he has to do, and I'm going to do my job.
But in this particular circumstance, the point was that they were on the same page.
Correct.
And so we worked as a group together to try and accomplish their common objective, with the understanding that should she have a change of heart, you're going to aggressively represent her contrary to my and my client's interest.
And let's be fair, with the understanding that if your client doesn't keep doing what he had to do, which was try and get help and better himself and try and be a better person and get make the marriage work again, that all bets were off. The only benefit we were going to get from this is maybe I call you in advance and say, hey, all bets are off. She wants to go forward.
Well,
that's about the only benefit we.
Well, the other yeah, it is, but that's the whole point of it. The point of it is that we're able to do because there is an ethics issue here, right? You have a conflict of interest. You can't represent both people.
Right.
The same firm can't represent both people. And if you and I have the common interest, it's to the disservice of the client.
Which some lawyers do that, and that's not good.
But we were very clear and upfront, and you and I had that understanding. In fact, it was almost kind of like a side joke between us. How funny would it be if we were on opposite sides of the fence?
I'd love doing
like
that.
You and your brother, throwing punches at one another.
But I love that. But I guess I'm just by nature antagonistic.
Well, as a corollary to this, the general public should understand that you want your lawyer to have a decent professional relationship with the other side's lawyer. That's often much more helpful than it is a hindrance. And people don't understand that. They say, well, I tell people all the time, they come to me and say, well, what if he gets a really good lawyer? What if she gets a really good lawyer? I say, well, great.
Hopefully.
I said, great. I said, I probably know the really good lawyer. We'll talk it through. We'll get you guys through this.
Same thing happens when I get clients that come in on criminal cases and I look at the docket and I'll see a special unit prosecutor, right? Which is a guy who's been around. He really knows what he's doing. He's really good. And when I see that, I go, oh, thank God. We got a special unit prosecutor. They usually freak out. Wait, isn't he better? I'm like, yeah, but that's exactly why I want him.
The problem is your soon-to-be ex gets a bad lawyer. Then you got a tiger by the tail. Now you need to open up your checkbook and maybe kiss your kids goodbye for a little while and maybe kiss your house goodbye because now you got a problem.
And I think good and bad may be one way to look at it, but another way to look at it is ethical and unethical. And going back to what we first talked about, you have a lot of unethical lawyers that are going to give unethical advice.
Correct.
And they're going to flat out
in
tell
family. Let's be clear. Not too many. There are, because there are people that do everything. But in family law, these lawyers are looking to get paid. Prosecutors get the same salary whether you get convicted or not. They don't care. But family lawyers, they're getting paid by the hour. And a lot of them like to antagonize and cause more issues.
And churning fees is a big deal in family court cases.
I'll give you a firsthand experience. I had a case in Broward. There was a divorce case, and then she filed for domestic violence against my client. I had the husband. And at the domestic violence hearing, this was about 15 years ago, at the domestic violence hearing, she showed up. She had a lawyer in the divorce case. She showed up without her lawyer in the domestic violence case. I guess he hadn't filed a notice of appearance. And she tells the judge, after she's been sworn in, that the only reason she wanted to dismiss the domestic violence case, and the judge said, well, why'd you file it? My lawyer told me to. Well, do you have any fear of your husband? No. Do you have any? Did he hit you or do anything to you? Not really.
No, they weaponize.
Why did you file this? My lawyer told me to.
They weaponize it.
Lawyer wasn't there.
And apart from that, what about your experience in terms of just fee churning? I mean,
it's terrible. It's terrible.
Because you have a lot of things that happen. Look, there are some criminal lawyers that charge by the hour. I would say very small percentage overall. Mostly what we do is we charge flat fees. We know our business. We have a pretty good idea of how much time we're going to have to put into a case. And we don't want to track our hours, to be perfectly honest.
Really?
It's a pain in the ass.
It's a pain in the ass.
So it's easier. I would much rather take a bath and work for a little bit less than have to track my hours and work for a little bit more. But you guys are tracking hours. And you have other things in civil that we don't have in criminal. For example, you have mandatory disclosures and you have interrogatories and requests for production and your basic family law packet that you have to provide in any case. It's a lot of paper.
A lot of paperwork. Yeah, the issue is really that people will churn the file. They will make stuff up. They will give their client, let's call it possibly bad advice or different advice than maybe another lawyer would give. And I find that it's really as a family law attorney, people come to you, they're never having a good day. No one's ever in my office for the first time because they're having a good day. And at stake is their kids, their house, their retirement, maybe a family-owned business. Everything is on the table in your average family case. Everything. And
the more you have, the higher the stakes.
The higher the stakes. And you've got one chance. I tell my clients, you have one chance to do this. So let's do it right. You have options. Let's go through the options and let's make a decision about what makes sense for you. But let's talk about the options, but don't listen to your hairdresser. Don't listen to other people.
God forbid.
And the most important thing is realize that when someone's in my office, they are vulnerable. That's what I have to keep in mind. They are vulnerable. I could tell them anything, and some lawyers do.
Right.
Some lawyers will tell them absolutely anything because they don't know what to believe. They're going to trust the lawyer to tell them what the right thing to do, to give them good advice, give them the options, and not all lawyers do, unfortunately. And so these people who are vulnerable and are in uncharted waters will make bad decisions, get led down the primrose path to bad.
Here's what I think, and I don't know if we touched upon it before we started the show or on the show, but correct me if I'm wrong. One of the tips that we can give clients, because it's hard for them to know who's a good lawyer and who's telling them the truth, right? One of the tips is what David said right earlier. If your lawyer wants to fight coming out of the gate, that's a red flag. That's a bad sign, and I'll explain to you why. There's always in life, just like in court, there's always time to fight. But the minute if I walk into a bar and I just walk up to David and I bitch slap him, I can guarantee you we're going to have a fight. I don't know what problem I have with him, but if I bitch slap him, we're going to get into a fight. But if I walk up to him and say, hey, listen, when you came in the park, you scratched my car. I don't know. David might say, oh my God, did I really? I'm so sorry.
Can I buy
my
drink?
Insurance? Let me buy you a drink. Let me pay for it. I don't know. He might tell me, really? Go screw yourself. I don't care what you're saying. Get it the hell out of here. And then I bitch slap him. There's always time for that. You don't want a lawyer who fights because he's just going to make it worse in anything, in criminal, in civil, in family, in probate. Fighting coming out of the gate is a red flag. You don't want that lawyer.
But you do want a lawyer who's a fighter.
Yeah,
Yes,
but a guy who's going to try and resolve things nicely first.
And a lawyer that won't listen to a client. I get that a lot. I end up being the second lawyer on cases because the first lawyer
All the time
wouldn't listen to him. Just whenever I talk to my lawyer, all they do is tell me to shut up and do what they tell me. And I tell clients all the time, listen, people need to realize I may pass this client on the street 10 years from now and not know who they are, but the decisions that these people are making now are going to affect them and their children for the rest of their lives. So it's very important that they have a lawyer that they can communicate with.
That's actually become my niche, is taking over for lawyers that have screwed the case up. That's become my niche.
And it costs twice as much to fix up a screwed up
because
case.
Let's look at the analogy. Now I'm coming in. Now I'm walking in the door of this bar, and David's already got into a fist fight with you, and he sees that I'm coming in, and I'm tapping out. I'm saying, hey, get out. I'm coming in. David's ready to swing. He's ready. I'm going to have to block and try and calm him down. And that takes more work. I got to calm the judge down because the judge thinks that my client is a jerk because his lawyer was a jerk. Trust me, guys, you don't want somebody who's going to fight coming out of the gate. You want a guy like Jack Reacher. You see the movie Jack Reacher?
Great show.
I love that line when he gets on the street and he looks at the guy and goes, remember,
You wanted this.
you wanted this. You want a guy who's going to be reluctant to fight, but if the fight happens, all hell's going to break loose and you're going to win.
Let me ask you, Dave, kind of on an unrelated topic, but since we're talking about, the stakes in a family law case, you also do pre-family work, like prenuptials and post-nuptials. What's the deal with those? Are they worth the paper they're written on? I mean,
it depends. Especially if it's a second marriage and someone has children from a prior marriage, or they have a family-owned business, they're in business with their family, or they have a large retirement account, pension, something like that. Yeah, generally a prenuptial agreement is going to be absolutely worth it. And a prenuptial agreement can be very narrow in scope. It can just carve out the 401k. Hey, look, in the event that we get divorced, honey, I love you, but my 401k is my 401k. Or a premarital home. Okay, so a premarital agreement can be as narrow in scope as you want it to, or it can be as broad in scope and waive alimony and everything.
Is it fair to say that the more narrow it is, the more tailored it is, the more likely it is to be upheld? Do these things get shot down easily? Does it cost you more to challenge it than it does to do it?
Well, they are very difficult to challenge. In 2008, the legislature changed the law, and people should know this, that they made it so that the agreement has to essentially be unconscionable, meaning that anybody that read this agreement would say, absolutely no way in hell would anybody in their right mind sign this. Right. So it really raised the bar for overturning these, for vacating or voiding these agreements. It made them very difficult.
I've actually had one or two clients, and I did one myself for my second marriage. And this is, I've had one or two clients that come in and have wanted to do, and they kept telling me, do this and do that. And I would tell them, absolutely not. I'd say, that's just not fair. You believe me, this will be challenged, and it's not the right thing to do. What I do like about prenups is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you look at the history of our clients when we have divorced clients or family clients, there was a time where they were madly in love. Mm-hmm. There was a time when they would look at each other and say, you're my soulmate. There was a time when they would say, I love you, I would never hurt you. None of that. But when they're sitting in your office, it's like a completely different human being, either your client or the other one. It doesn't matter. When there's a prenup, there's less fighting. You may be pissed off at each other, but there's no fighting because it was in writing. You all agreed to it. And for example, on the prenup that I used with my second wife, I made it very fair, or tried to, right? Anything that was in either person's name was theirs. So if we're married for 10 years and after 10 years, all the properties are in my name and all the cars are in my name, honey, that's on you. 10 years ago, you signed a prenup that you agreed that everything in your name was yours if you got divorced. So why didn't you put some of these properties in your name?
Dave? Does that fly, or does she get to take him to the laundry?
It depends on how it's written. You know, these are contracts and they're going to be enforced as contracts. And
one of the things you got to do is you got to give her time to review it.
Financial disclosure.
I think the minimum is 10, but I usually tell my clients, give her 30. They have the option of seeing a lawyer or waiving it. I usually tell my clients, make sure she goes to see a lawyer because it just makes it stronger.
And one thing that's very important, especially if I'm representing the pecunious spouse, usually the person,
use small words, man.
Yeah, come on, man.
If I'm representing the spouse that has a shit ton of money, can I say that?
Yes. Wealthy spouse.
This wealthy spouse.
Does he have a shit ton of money? If he does,
that's what
say
pecunious means.
That's what pecunious means. So
I'd like to be. I want to be a pecunious
at home.
I want to be a pecunious spouse one day.
Yeah.
So see, that's what happens. Spend too much time in the office. I got to spend more time hanging with you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
We'll dummy you down.
Don't worry about that.
So I like to send a letter that lays it all out. Hey, listen, this is a contract. It's a proposal. It's a draft. Take this to anybody you want. Take it to your rabbi. Take it to your priest. Take it to your accountant.
Right.
Take it to your family member. To hire a lawyer if you want. And just let us know if you have any changes to this. And oh, by the way, here's my client's last 3 years worth of tax returns. Here's his current bank statements. Here's his 401k statement. Let me know if there's anything else that you want to see before we go further with this agreement. And I always tell my clients, listen, let's put something in here, one or two things in here that he or she we know they're not going to agree to, right? So
that's a good idea. I never thought of that.
They come back with revisions and we say, okay.
They revised
the deck.
They actually looked at it and they revised it. But they didn't revise this part.
Right. No problem.
I like that.
So let me dovetail into another thing that's on the same genre, but also is another intersection between family and criminal, and that's theft and marital assets and dissipation and researching where are assets, hiding them, spending them. This is a big time issue. Can one spouse steal from another spouse?
Yes. In terms of, not that it's a crime necessarily, but if your spouse is doing a lot of traveling to, let's say, the United Arab Emirates, let's say to the Seychelles or to the Channel Islands, you might want to
Liechtenstein.
You might want to start asking some questions. Yeah.
But so
before the divorce. By the way,
divorce.
If your spouse starts mentioning the Cook Islands, call me. You're about to get divorced.
Right.
So if one of the spouses is dissipating funds, say they're funneling marital monies into an account somewhere, or they're spending it on their paramour. Boy, now here I am using the fancy words, right?
What's that mean?
Yeah, right.
I know what a paramour is. Listen, let's be honest.
Anybody knew
he trumps you on the big words, because I didn't even know what that was.
So
I know what a paramour is.
So if somebody's spending money on their side guy or side gal or side whatever, I mean, it's Pride Month, so doesn't matter to me what they're spending their money on.
As long as it's not a barnyard animal.
Listen, as long as they're happy, I don't care.
Even if it's a barnyard animal, well, I guess, right? If the sheep is happy,
no, who
are we to get involved?
But is it? Yeah, but
I'm gonna plug a show. I'm gonna plug a show we're gonna do, because we are gonna have somebody come in from a local 501c that's an animal rescue, an animal shelter, and foster and adoption agency, and they're going to come in and do a show with us. So we will talk about animals.
Hopefully, we're not talking about animal husbandry.
We can get into your little fetish during that show.
I haven't done one of those prenups.
Hey, have you ever done? Speaking of which, in a divorce case, have you ever had a case where the parties have litigated over pets?
Yes, actually. Now, in the state of Florida, pets are chattel. It's not like having a child. It's not the same thing.
Pets are property.
It's just property. So,
You
flip
gotta
a
fight.
coin. What's the judge going to do?
Well,
You
see,
know?
that's why my significant other and I got 2 dogs.
So King Solomon
So we'll just split
Yeah.
the dogs.
Well, somebody
cut
gets
the dog in
animal.
half.
Well,
Do they do-
there's
I mean, do you-
there's longitudinal and latitudinal.
Well, I mean, like, for
It
example,
depends on
let's
how
say
you vivisect
let's
the
say you've
dog.
got 2 people who really love their pet. Let's say they don't have kids, or even they do have kids, they love their pet as much as their kids.
I had a case where it was a husband and wife, they had no children, 1 pet. They actually did a time sharing schedule for the dog. I
Okay,
wrote it
listen.
up.
All right, and,
Listen,
and
I
so
am a humongous dog lover. I mean, my dogs sleep with me, they live with me, I take them everywhere. I am not doing time sharing with my dog. Just saying right now,
Well,
I'm not time sharing.
only other
She
option,
can have it if she wants it.
there's 3 options when it comes to dogs. You do an arrangement where you get the dog this time and you have the dog that time. And then there's the opportunity to buy the other side out. The dog's worth $500. Here's your $250.
How about if
And
we
there's
put?
another sell the dog and split the money. But
How about
no
if
one
we
wants to
put
do
them
that.
at opposite ends of the room and put the dog in the middle,
And
and
who
whoever the
comes?
dog goes to? No,
Okay,
that
that
makes even
works.
better sense to
That
me.
works.
that's what I would do. I see it on TV all the time.
That would
Clients think what happens in the courtroom is what they see on TV. So why don't we just take advantage of one of the smart things they've
Well,
ever done?
see, that's why my client bought that filet mignon perfume. That's what that was.
Let's talk a little bit about another intersection. And we're very familiar with the concept of arrest warrants. Happens in criminal court all the time. Fugitive warrants, probation warrants, initial arrest warrants. There's
Everything.
more warrants than we can.
Even bodily attachment
we
for
can-
witnesses.
So in family court, you guys have the functional equivalent of an arrest warrant. It's called a writ of bodily attachment. And those things can issue for child support arrearages
Yes.
or for alimony.
Yes, not often enough, unfortunately.
Tell us a little about that.
Well, it's amazing because I have a second law firm where all I do is I collect unpaid alimony and child support, and we are often seeking writs of bodily attachment, also writs of neexia to keep the person from leaving the country, surrender their passport. But a writ of bodily attachment is, yes, you know what, especially if the person doesn't show up at court, there's a contempt hearing, they don't show. They owe $10,000 in unpaid child support. That's when I've seen the judges issue the writs of bodily attachment. Okay, go pick this guy up and bring him in here.
Let me cut you off for a second. I don't want to stop your train of thoughts. Just keep it there. But what you're saying at that point is the judge is issuing, it's a family court, which is a civil division judge
like a bench.
that's issuing what is effectively an arrest warrant.
Yes.
But in family court, it's called a writ of bodily attachment.
Correct.
And so it's saying to any law enforcement officer, and this is going to be red flagged into a law enforcement database. So if somebody gets pulled over, if their passport gets scanned, if for whatever reason they come across law enforcement, this red flag is going to pop up and it's going to say, take this person to jail.
Yes.
And that's going to be because they didn't pay child support or alimony.
Usually, yes.
I have a question that somebody asked. What if they're out of the country?
Well, that has a whole other set of issues.
That's a question.
It's a whole other set.
Questions are not going to be easy.
It's very difficult. I think it depends. I mean, you could. I had a client that was talking actually about sending in SEAL Team 6 to retrieve a child because there was a writ of bodily attachment issued for the father and the child who had fled to another country. And I thought that the client was going to go get SEAL Team 6 essentially. But the father actually came back with the child, so we didn't have to go there. But it's a whole set of complicated issues that are layered with the Parental Kidnapping Act, the Uniform Parental Kidnapping Act, the Hague Convention.
But that would be if they took the kid.
If they took.
But what
the
if
kid.
they're just out of the country and they owe child support?
It's very difficult if they have
Good
assets.
luck.
If they have assets here. Sometimes we do asset searches and we find a bank account, we find a piece of rental real estate, and we can seize that and in effect get them to show up in court.
You've done that before. You've actually taken people's property, correct?
Correct.
Cars, jewelry,
Yes.
bank accounts.
Yes.
What about safe deposit boxes?
Oh yeah.
Well, I got.
Well, you get all
Oh,
hot
yeah.
and bothered when we
I
say,
got-
oh, yeah.
Because
that's
that's
straight
like
words.
because that's like a treasure. That's like it's like a box of
You don't know
chocolates.
I
what's
wish
in
I
there.
had brought the picture. My law partner and I, we have a nice picture of $38,100 in crisp $100 bills that we had in a safe deposit box. The ex-husband came into court on a cane, said he's disabled, retired, has no money, has no income, has nothing. Our client recalled that he used to bank at Bank of America and heard that he might have had a safe deposit box. So we got a open order to go to Bank of America. We broke open the safe deposit box, and lo and behold, $38,000 in cash. So we took a nice picture. I took it to Kinko's and had it blown up.
When
we brought that into Judge David Young, and we said, Judge, he says he has no money, but voila, he has this. Oh, we got
in front of David, that must not have gone well.
We got the whole.
Judge Young must have not that.
He must have loved that.
Oh, he must have loved that. But here's the question I had for you: what about flagging it with Interpol so that, let's say, when they try to come back in the country with their passport, can you do that?
There are ways to do that. I mean, you have to keep in mind that it's a state order. That if you're going to go to some of the federal authorities and try to get them to cooperate, they really have a choice to cooperate or not to cooperate.
That's a good point.
So it really depends. I did have a doctor in Panama that owed my client $1.4 million. And I went so far because of the money that was at stake. I went so far as we had 2 meetings with ICE out in Doral. And we were doing everything we could to get this guy picked up because we believed he was going to be coming into San Francisco for his daughter's wedding. So we were trying to get him picked up, hoping he was going to fly from Panama to Miami, Miami to San Francisco. It ended up not happening that way, unfortunately. But certainly, if the
was ICE going to cooperate,
they were very interested. They set up a second meeting. We went for the second meeting, spent hours with them. Ultimately, it didn't come to fruition. But yeah,
I got another question here also. This question is getting back together with my ex-wife a good idea or a bad idea?
Call me for an appointment.
Depends on the ex-wife. Is he talking about mine?
Do you find
if he's talking about my ex-wife, I can tell him what to do.
Have you had repeats like that? Have you had those situations in your practice?
I have had people go through the entire process, pay $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, crazy amounts of money to get divorced, have everything set up. They go to the final hearing, they get divorced. 2 weeks later, they call me.
They want to get remarried.
They want to get remarried.
And did they or don't they? Or you don't?
A couple. One time, they do. One time, I was representing an 82-year-old man up in Boca Raton, who was divorcing his wife of about 2 years, and
she was 27.
She was close to his age. But long story short, I was out having dinner about 6 months after I got them divorced. And I see them arm in arm walking out of a restaurant. And I walk up to him and I said, "Hey, how you doing? Is everything all right?" And he said, "Well, listen, I tried the dating scene and no one can do the things to me that she does. And well, he got
there you go.
The heart wants what the heart wants."
I don't even want to think about it. I don't even want to picture that in my mind. I don't at that age. I don't want to see myself having sex at that age. Why would I want to think of somebody else having sex at that age?
Well, listen, different strokes for different folks.
I'm getting to that point where I'm going to start turning off the lights. I don't even want to see it.
Have you ever had a situation where you've been threatened or physically?
Absolutely. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned,
don't
tell me
into the briefcase.
Don't tell me you got his head
into the briefcase.
Just don't tell me you got his head in a basket.
I carry a level 3A bulletproof plate in my briefcase.
Can you get into the courthouse with that?
I can, because it's not a firearm, but
it's just
it's a level 3. It's a level 3 ballistic panel. And I came home one day after I'm not going to say I took the man's kids away, because it was the judge that did it. I just presented my client's best case. For the safety of the children, I think the judge made the right decision. Based
on the fact that this lunatic showed up at your house?
This guy showed up. I come home one day and this guy's outside my house. And he was acting as if he was dealing with one of my neighbors and buying a bicycle. But and when he saw me, he didn't say, "What are you doing here?" He just looked at me and smiled and just kept walking.
So he didn't actually
towards you.
He didn't actually pull a gun or anything like that. But he was definitely there to give you the eyes of, "I know where you live, pal."
We would have had an issue if he had pulled a weapon.
He would have had an issue.
He would have had an issue with me already. He's lucky he ran into you.
Well,
don't come to my house. Do not come to my house. Just telling you right now, that ain't going to end well.
I won't go. I won't say anything else. But
that's not going to end.
It was taken care of.
So you've had situations where you've actually, so when I mean, we started the show and I said that family lawyers are the most targeted for
because
violence
it's very emotional.
By any other.
Let's be honest, Michael. We do a lot of criminal. Most of our clients, they know what they did. They understand that this is a game. That they were on one side of the tracks.
I like to say crime is usually honest. it's usually very honest. Everybody knows where they stand
Right.
in a criminal case. The victim knows they're the victim. The accused knows they're
How
the
funny? How
accused.
funny is it? I'll give you an example. How funny is it when one of my clients gets arrested, which doesn't happen as often as it should, but they get arrested, and I get a call from a cop saying, "Hey, we arrested your client. He wants, we want to have a conversation with him, but he doesn't want to talk to us until you get here." That's rarely, but how funny is it when I show up and I look at the cops and I go, "You realize he's not going to
He's still not talking to
And they
you.
start laughing. They go, "Yeah, I know. I just had to try. Thanks for coming. Let's have a cup of coffee." Because they get it. They know that this is how the game is played. But when it comes to family, people are thrust into a situation that they're not used to. It's extremely emotional. And this is where the danger comes.
And like I said, everything's on the table. Everything is on the table.
Everything.
I mean, this you may be talking to you may be talking about a couple who's been married 40 years. Kids are grown. Kids are gone. It's not a kid issue anymore. This is a man's life savings or a woman's house that she redecorated and pumped her entire inheritance into. You know, you're talking about real
Right.
life-altering.
And sometimes one spouse never saw it coming.
No.
And it starts getting emotional because they're dealing with a lot. They're dealing with thinking this was their soulmate to now catching that not only did they do whatever, but they want to leave them high and dry.
But that's a great point, though, because whenever you have a death or a divorce, you're dealing with the 5 stages of the grief reaction, right? Denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. And the person that comes to your office to file for divorce, they've been through denial. They've been bargaining.
They may still be in anger.
Anger.
They're in anger, that's for sure.
But oftentimes I find that when they're in my office, they're at depression or acceptance. They're like, they've tried the therapy, they've tried the counseling, they've tried the begging.
And they've already been through 2 or 3 lawyers anyhow.
Right, exactly. But they're done. They're ready to go. They're just like, get me out of this, okay? But to your point, if the other spouse doesn't see it coming, they've got to go through the same 5 stages.
Right.
So I have to figure out, when my client's sitting in my office, where is the spouse? Do they know this is coming? Is this going to blindside them? Because they have to go through denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance.
And how difficult is it to have a conversation with your client about something that they really need to be focused on, what's in the best interest of themselves, the family, and everything else, when they're in the stage of depression, or they're in the stage of anger, or they're in the stage of denial? They're not getting it. They just are not in reality.
But I want the other side in bargaining.
Yeah. Oh, for
so
sure.
If they
acceptance.
Well, let's get them through the denial stage. Let's get them into the bargaining stage. Let's get that agreement signed. Then they can be angry later after they realize what they signed.
You see that?
But let's get them through that.
See, this is why people visit your house, David.
You see this though, where in family law cases, sometimes there's one side that doesn't want to get divorced.
Correct.
And Florida is what we call a no-fault divorce state, right? Tell the folks what that means.
Okay, so that means that if one party wants to get divorced, there's going to be a divorce. The other side can say all they want. Judge, I think there's hope. We need to try this, the other thing. I have seen on occasion judges say, fine, if you think this is going to work, I'm going to order you all to counseling. And my client or the other side will say, absolutely no way, judge, this thing is done. They'll go through the peremptory motions, and then we're back in court in a month or two. And
I always like to say this.
Basically, you can say, it doesn't matter if one client says, look, judge, I'm willing to hack off my arm. I love her so much. I love him so much.
If the marriage, if one party says that the marriage is irretrievably broken,
over. And now it's just a question of how do we distribute everything and close it clean.
And here's a pro tip that I've been telling my daughter for years. With anything in life, don't ever go where you're not wanted. I mean, you may want to be with your spouse, but if your spouse doesn't want you, what are you doing? Same with college. When you're thinking of going to college, how many kids say, oh, I'm in high school. I want to go to this school. I want to go to Princeton. No. You're going to go to the school that wants you, because that's really the best scenario in life, is to be where you're wanted in jobs, schools, marriages,
another
friendships.
thing is kids. People always say, well, we stayed together for the kids. You know what, folks? The kids know.
The kids know.
The kids know.
Yeah, and they're not always better off for you staying together.
At all.
No, they're not always better off. I mean, it's a decision that if the parents are going to consciously stay together for the kids, that's a conversation that really needs to be addressed, maybe with a therapist, with some professional, maybe even if the children are old enough or mature enough to get the children involved in that process, although generally we try to keep the children out of it. But, children are smart.
They're very smart.
12-year-olds, they get it.
And here's the bad situation in that, or one of the potential bad situations, because it might work, but one of the potentials you have to look at is the home is a microcosm of society.
Yes.
What we learn in the home is what we do out in the real
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And even if you think, well, my wife and I have an amicable relationship, we're only here for the kids, but she doesn't care that I go off and I cheat on her, but I keep it quiet and she does her thing and we keep it quiet. What you're teaching your kids is that this is a marriage. That when they grow up, they're going to be with a spouse who does whatever they want, and the kid doesn't do anything with the family. So the kid goes with dad for, to this event, and then she goes with mom to that event. And this is what the kid is learning. And so when the kids get out, they're going to recreate that. They're going to think that's what a marriage is. So it's still very harmful to the kid.
Adults need to be adults.
Pretty
That's
much.
really the bottom line. And, I guess going back to where we started almost is there's always hope, right? I mean, whether you're arrested, whether you're, get a restraining order filed against you, whether you are going through divorce proceedings or you're contemplating it, there's always hope, because think about the case that we had. What could be much worse than the facts of that case as it presented itself on paper? And look what happened after 9-12 months of real dedication and devotion to making it work and to fixing the problems and to bettering themselves. So there is hope.
There is, of course.
And it's really a matter of what do you want? I guess one last thing I want to ask you about family is, when we think about divorces, I'm of the era, I think of the War of the Roses. We think about real horrible emotional fighting. But there's also uncontested divorces, right?
Yes.
There's simplified divorces. There's mediated divorces. There's ways to get divorced if you are two rational people who don't want to go to war.
And in my opinion, that's the better option. Frankly, I don't make as much money on any case where the parties are rational, mature, responsible adults and they can settle their differences themselves. But it's always a better result, because two people that are getting divorced, neither one of them is going to get everything that they want.
Right.
But they're going to get at least the power to pick and choose what it is that they get that they don't want, rather than having a judge who may be seeing them on the first day of trial for the first time, knows nothing about them, is going to hear everything about their 20-year marriage in the next 1 or 2 days, and is going to make a decision that is going to affect them for the rest of their lives.
And you're not blaming the judge. It's not fair to the judge.
No,
the judge is doing the best they can.
The judge is going to do the best that the judge can. That's been my experience. But they're going to meet the parties for one day. And the parties are going to want to tell the judge everything, and the judge is going to not be able to hear everything.
And like you said, the judge is meeting them on their worst day.
Right.
He's not meeting them when they're madly in love on their honeymoon. He's seeing a picture it's a snapshot of that marriage, and the picture he's seeing is probably the worst case scenario.
And it's going to be very limited, because we all know as lawyers, what you can get into evidence is not always
the whole story.
In fact, it almost never is
the
whole story. Because
Correct.
The rules of evidence prohibit us from getting certain things in. So the judge will never know about certain things that you may want the judge to know. All the time people in my office saying, well, wait till the judge hears my side. The judge has to hear my side. And it's like, well, what makes you think the judge is going to care? It's not a thing against the judges. It's just they've got 20,000 cases. They're going to see you for 1 or 2 days. They're going to do the best that they can under those circumstances, and then they've got the next case coming up.
Right.
The other thing is also clients don't know what we know, like not just in terms of the admissibility of evidence and the reality of what may or may not come in, but they also don't understand the legal process.
Right.
So to them, this is the biggest cataclysmic event in their life. But to the judge, it's just another case.
Right.
So to them, it's like, oh my God, this is going to be the Perry Mason moment. This is going to be the Excalibur. But the reality is, to the judge, it's
and the client's going to come into court. Wait till the judge hears how my husband cheated on me. No, the judge isn't going to care.
Right.
Number one, it doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
Current law. But number two, this judge may have just had a 2-hour evidentiary hearing where she had to take children away from a man who was putting cigarettes out on their arms.
That's a best case scenario here in Dade County,
right.
by the way.
So your he was cheating on me.
But even still, David, let's be honest. That says nothing about our client. But the judge knows that one person is going to say one thing and the other person is going to deny it. They know that. So they don't know you personally. They don't know our clients personally. They know somebody's lying, and they're sitting there trying to figure out who's lying, and they're not going to know.
Often very difficult to tell, because good lawyers can make even the craziest stories sound plausible.
Oh, it's great. I know how to make my crazy clients sound plausible.
Right.
I tell them not to talk.
Right, but that's
Don't
the
open
key,
your mouth.
because when you have a client that you can't control, then
Yeah.
that's an even worse. That client who gives you the wait till the judge hears this and I'm going to tell this. That's when my antennas go up, because I'm always worried about snatching victory
from the jaws,
snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah.
Because my client just had to say this. They just had to get that point out, and they don't get the fact that the reason you're paying me is to give you the advice that you can't be saying.
We have to filter the clients. We have to, because it's very rare that I have a client that is, unless it's another attorney that does family law as well, they're usually not sophisticated enough, don't have the experience to understand how to present their issues to this judge. And they will say the wrong thing, or they'll want the judge to know this. I say, no, you don't want the judge to know this. You don't. But
it's difficult. It's difficult to express 25 or 30 years of experience into somebody's mind who's hell bent on a train of thought and doesn't have that same experience.
Right. The thing I found with my divorce clients, my family clients, is the ones who feel like they were betrayed tend to think that that's going to influence the judge. And what they don't realize is that under the law, the judge can't allow that to be. I understand you feel betrayed, but the judge is not ruling because your spouse lied to you about loving you. That's not what the judge is going to get involved in. The judge is getting involved in the legal aspect of it.
The judge is not going to care that you no longer like your husband. The judge is going to assume that's why you're there. Right. And
it doesn't matter why you don't like him. It doesn't matter unless it's something that legally matters. But most of the times it doesn't.
To double down on that cheating question, it's like David said, we're a no-fault divorce state. So it doesn't matter. You can go in there because your spouse cheated on you, or your spouse, you don't like the way that they make the bed, or they bought a car that you don't like. The reasons for why you want a divorce generally are irrelevant to the divorce itself.
Doesn't matter if he had
here in Florida.
It doesn't matter if you had a threesome on your marital bed with your daughter's two best friends
and put it on Facebook.
Doesn't matter. That won't matter.
Well, it might matter if they're underage.
Well,
but for the divorce, it won't.
Jeffrey Epstein this time.
Yeah, we're not. Let's not. Now we know where your fantasies lie. But no. Exactly. No, but they tend to think if the judge hears this, he's going to hate my husband or my wife. No, he's not. He's not.
And frankly,
also you have to remember too, very important in any area of law, but certainly in family and criminal, know your judge, right? Because there are a lot of judges that we know a lot about, and some of them are more, less likely to be shocked,
correct,
than others on a given set of facts.
Someone gave me a paperweight that says a good lawyer knows the law, a great lawyer knows the judge.
Yeah, and by the way, that doesn't mean that the judge is going to be unethical because we're friends.
Right.
What that means is that we know what this judge is really looking for. What is this? What are the things that this judge wants to know?
Some judges want background and explanation. Some judges don't care. They just want to know, what is the issue and what are my options?
So we need to wrap this up because we're coming up on a hard close here.
We got 2 minutes left.
And I just want to, first off, thank you, David, very much for coming and taking time out of your day. I mean, I know a guy who charges $450 an hour like you, this cost you a lot of money to be here today. So we really appreciate it. And Ed's going to write you a check later. It's going to bounce faster. It's going to bounce faster than you can deal with it.
But I'll write it for you.
But that's all right.
We signed the contract first.
And so I want to thank you because, again, I think this has been really just a great discussion, and I hope that those who have listened are going to get something out of it.
Yeah, and they can ask us questions. If you're seeing this show and it's not live, you can send us questions in Messenger, and we'll be glad to answer them for you.
Since this is all about family, right? I have a surprise that I was fortunate enough because school's going to end this week and it's early release, and my family is here. So my son Aiden joined us.
Why couldn't he have been on the show the whole? Why couldn't he have been on the show the whole hour instead of you?
There he is.
Come on,
say hi, Aiden.
All right, guys, we'll be back next Monday. We're still doing it at 2 next Monday.
Yes, next
2
Monday
o'clock at Monday.
I don't know what we're doing or what we're going to talk about, but who cares?
We'll have fun.
We'll make it interesting. We'll make it entertaining.
Scotch.
And we're going to be at your service, right? At your service. That's
at your service, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.